The NHS has said the cultural practice of having sex and children with your first cousins is just like white women having babies over the age of 34. Well, no, it's not, is it? The NHS is too afraid of offending a certain culture to speak up about a health epidemic among children based on a barbaric, sickening and outdated practice that has no place in British society. The report states, it is important to mention that just like a cousin marriage is a cultural practice in Asian/British Pakistani heritage, resulting in increasing risk factors for congenital anomalies, so too is choosing to give birth at or after age 34 in white British women/couples. This is largely a result of choosing lifestyles embedded in liberal values, such as preferring jobs, careers, bodily fitness and individualism over giving birth before the age 34. How dare they put having sex with your first cousin, and presumably coming from a very long line of first cousins, on a par with a white British woman in her early 30s delaying motherhood for a year so she can get on in her career? It is a disgusting thing to say. There's no way we'd be sweeping any other health issue like this under the carpet, would we? I mean, you're not even allowed to advertise cheese on the London Underground, for goodness sake, in case someone looks at a block of Wensleydale and can't physically restrain themselves from going into M&S and gorging on it until they give themselves kidney failure. But you can advertise on the NHS for nurses who specialise in inbreeding. Welcome to modern Britain, everybody. The woke, progressive arc of liberal inclusivity and multiculturalism has resulted in incest nurses. Close relative marriage neonatal nurses can earn about 50 grand a year picking up the pieces, so people, predominantly from Pakistani heritage, can continue churning out kids with inbreeding problems and expecting the taxpayer to pay the bill. Now, I can't help but wonder whether if this wasn't such a culturally and racially charged topic, perhaps the problem might have been handled differently. Have we been too afraid of causing offence? Well, the Daily Mail seems to have been. Here's a picture that they used to furnish their article on all of this. It was a picture of a white American inbred family, but that's not who we're really talking about here, is it? No, because according to numerous different reports, around 62% of mothers of Pakistani heritage were married to their first cousin in a study carried out in Bradford 10 years ago. You'll be relieved to know that's now fallen to about 46%. The London Borough of Redbridge found that 1 in 5 child deaths were caused by their parents being related. A report from Birmingham found that 1 in 5 baby deaths were linked to first or second cousin couples. Yes, the Tories should have banned this when they were in power. But Labour are the government now. It's their job. Now, they don't look like they're going to do it. Why not? Yes, well, I suppose they wouldn't want to be culturally insensitive now, would they? Thoughts on my panel this evening. Political consultant Suzanne Evans. We've also got political commentator Charlie Downs, former Labour Party advisor Matthew Larzer. I mean, Suzanne, the NHS telling people that cousin marriage and therefore producing offspring in cousin marriages is the same thing as white British women aged 34 having a baby is frankly a disgrace. OK, well, there's two things here, aren't there? First of all, I don't think it's the NHS's... the NHS shouldn't be defending any practice that leads to birth defects. That's the first thing. But is it a fact? Is it a fact that women over 35 have the same number of birth defects as first cousin marriage? If that's a fact, then that's a fact and that's the way it is. So when I first heard about this bill coming forward to ban first cousin marriages in this country, I thought, yeah, great, absolutely, we should. And then I thought about it a bit more, and I'm actually not so sure. So I'm open to being persuaded on this one, to be honest. The idea of a ban, I can see where it's coming from, and it is because I think we're talking about one particular culture where it is rife, and I think that's wrong. And absolutely it shouldn't be happening, and people should be dissuaded from it. But if we have an all-out ban, that means, for instance, that the whole premise that we're having babies born with defects falls apart, really, because what about first cousins who are in their 50s, 60s, 70s? Are they not allowed to get married when they're not going to be doing any harm to anybody? I still think that's a bit weird. I still think it's a bit weird, and I don't think it's right. But I think an all-out ban is probably going a little bit too far. You could ban them from having kids, at least, I suppose. Well, I think there are lots of people who shouldn't have children for all sorts of reasons who are allowed to have children, but that's a different matter. But, look at our history. Queen Victoria married her first cousin,
but they stopped doing it, Suzanne. Jerry Lee Lewis more recently, although she was 12, and I really do draw the line at that, absolutely. Right. Albert Einstein married
62% of women in Birmingham in that survey were married to either their Bradford, apologies, were married to either their first or second cousin. I'm trying to know, well, what's your view on this? I mean, the NHS, now hiring nurses that are specialists in inbreeding, to me, seems like a backward step.
Well, I've got to tell you, Patrick, someone very close to me works in the NHS, and she works in a particularly diverse area of the country, and she's quite often dealing with mothers who are in relationships with their cousins, and she's dealing with the children that these couples have, and the rate of birth defects that she tells me about is absolutely shocking. The extra paperwork that it entails, the extra money, the extra time, the extra resources, these are all optional things that have been introduced into Britain as part of government policy, because let's be honest about this, it's not the native British population doing this en masse. It is an immigrant population that is engaging in these practices. And there's something you touched on in your monologue that I think really is crucial here, which is that this conversation about what this NHS trust has said, it actually strikes at the heart of the moral paradigm that we've lived in the West basically since the end of the Second World War, where the idea of judging somebody, the idea of drawing value judgments to say that one way of life is better than another is regarded as evil because it's somehow an infringement on that person's freedom or their, ability to express themselves. We're at a point now where we are equating the 34-year-old white women we're having children with cousin marriage, and that just it should indicate the level of insanity that we've reached.
It's not insanity. It's like I was saying, is that a fact or not? I suspect it's probably wrong. It doesn't ring true to me at all, to be honest. But if it's a fact, it's a fact.
No, the facts are, according to this report, was that if you look at the congenital defects amongst people who are in first and second cousin marriages, they are significant, right? There's a significant percentage of it. But when you look at women who are over the age of 34, and my understanding of this report is that they also factored in things such as obesity and smoking and other issues, then you could reach a level of congenital defects that were not massively dissimilar, but certainly not as bad as first or second.
I mean, the fact is, if you want to become a mother, you should be doing everything in your power to make sure your baby is healthy. And I think any woman should think very twice about marrying their first cousin if they're going to have babies.
But why?
The point is, I'm just not sure a ban is actually the right way to go here.
But why can we not just condemn this?
Issue, well, I think as the culture issue, I think we could take a different approach. We could say, for instance, if you're a Pakistani citizen living in this country, we will not let your first cousin wife immigrate to join you.
But why do we still labour under this delusion that all cultures are equal? Because all cultures are not equal.
I would never argue.
But that is the place. That's the place that this argument comes from. It's this notion that we have to treat all cultures with equal kind of treatment, which is nonsense.
Rather than cultures.
Behaviour comes from culture.
It's interesting you say that because I get what you're saying. We had Iqbal Mohammed, who was stood up in the House of Commons.
I never thought we'd have Suzanne agreeing with him.
I don't agree with him. Don't just get it wrong.
You're Iqbal Mohammed adjacent on this one.
I've defended Saudi Arabia.
But look, to make it more of a political issue, right? Unequivocally, if the Tories are going to make a big hoo-ha about this now, they should have made a hoo-ha about it.
Absolutely.
Many such cases, yeah.
Yeah, fine. Yeah. But they didn't, and we are where we are, as they say in middle management. So we are currently now with a Labour government. They are quite quiet on this. Do you think they're quiet on it because they don't want to create a cultural issue for themselves?
So I think that Iqbal Mohammed's speech that we heard there, I'd say that he is a left-wing Gaza independent who beat the Labour candidate. I'd say to all those on the liberal left who were cheering when those Gaza independents were elected, if you're a feminist, I wouldn't be particularly backing sentiments as expressed by Mr Mohammed there. In terms of what the government's going to do, so what's happened to brought this to is that Tory MP brought, I'm not sure if it was a private member's bill or a 10-minute rule bill, but it was a 10-minute rule bill, was it? Yeah. So it can't make it law, basically, they never become law. The government has sort of shied away from backing him and said they're going to bring their own proposals forward. I completely agree that the government should bring forward proposals that include a ban like this. So, I mean, it's in the government's, back on their in tray, and they should make the right decision.
There's a key point here, Charlie, for me, which is about morals. There's nothing morally morally wrong with a woman choosing to wait for various different career reasons or for whatever reason that may be to have a baby after the age of 34. I would argue there is something significantly morally wrong about having sex with your first cousin.
Well, this is the thing. For a lot of ordinary people, that's the level at which this is going to register. It's just gross, it's just disgusting, and it's immoral and weird, and it's not something we do in this country. Sure, you've made the point that there have been royal families in the past where this kind of thing
people do,
has been engaged.
The white, indigenous...
But I think about the fact that we could be having conversations. It's 2024, this is Britain. We could be having conversations about colonising the stars, and instead we're sitting here talking about whether we're going to allow subcontinental immigrants to have sex with their cousins.
This document from the NHS, which we do think is an historic document, i.e. it's a few years... So it's not... I thought it was older than that. No, absolutely. I mean, it's an absolute outrage because, you know, first of all, it's actually racist because the assumption that only white women wait to 34 to have a baby is news to my friends of different ethnicities who have waited into their 30s, so that everybody who's not white has their baby before 34. It is an outrageous document.
And I go back to what I said right at the beginning. The NHS should not be defending this. It absolutely shouldn't be defending it in the way it has.
And it worries me this is the NHS in Bradford. It's a specific Bradford NHS document doing this.
Yeah.
We've seen issues in communities across the north of England, like Rotherham, not a million miles away. And so if I was the Secretary of State for Health, I would be calling in the heads of the Bradford NHS.
There are other issues that are wrapped up with this, which is the notion, and this is not all by any means, but the notion of forced marriage in this. And the familial pressure to marry your first cousin.
Now, this for me is a massive issue, and this is my real concern about it, more than the birth defects, if you like. Because any one of us could have a baby with a birth defect and we don't know what causes it or might not be able to prevent it. But this, for me, is the issue. I think the heart of the matter is that first cousin marriages are used as a way to abuse women and force them into marriages. And for that reason, I would be very minded to vote for a ban.
There's also the cost, Charlie, to the NHS for this. Now, OK, yeah, absolutely, anyone can have babies with a variety of different defects, and anyone themselves can develop illnesses, some of which people may say are self-inflicted to smoking or whatever else, where you go, OK, well, the taxpayer has to pick up the tab at the NHS. There is a case, of course, that smokers pay for themselves several times over. However, willfully entering into things like cousin marriage, Charlie, and expecting the NHS to pay for that, I'm sorry, I just don't really think that's okay. I don't think the taxpayer, you know, having to pay, roughly speaking, somewhere in the region of around £50,000 a pop for a nurse that specialises in inbreeding in 2024 in Britain. Why are we paying for that?
Well, that is a great point, and as I've already said, I can tell you from anecdotal evidence in my own life that this is a massive cost to the taxpayer. But even if it wasn't, that wouldn't make it okay. We're so used to speaking in economic terms about all of the problems that we have in our country that we've forgotten that there is a moral element to this, which is, you know, even if it could be shown that this was in some way beneficial to the economy, not that I can imagine how it would be, but even if it could be shown that was the case, that wouldn't make it okay, because we're talking at the level of morality here. And if we can't draw value judgments between different practices, then we're lost.
Yeah, well, it is. Clearly, I think it's an interesting discussion because we're doing it at the top of the 10 o'clock hour. But it has been an even more fascinating discussion than I thought it was going to be. And it just showed the broad church of views that we are perfectly happy to have here every single evening on Patrick Christie's Night. So thank you very much.